Have you ever wondered why, despite all the knowledge you've gathered, your heart still feels restless and heavy? Have you ever noticed that no matter how many achievements you collect, you sometimes lie awake at night, battling a storm of thoughts that refuses to come? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to explore a subject that strikes at the core of modern living: education, wisdom, and the restless exhaustion of the human spirit. But instead of looking at education as grades, degrees, or social recognition, we're going to return to something far more essential: the education of the heart. Inspired by the ancient wisdom of the platform Sutra, we'll see how its teachings can help us calm our inner turbulence, free ourselves from endless cycles of overthinking, and rediscover clarity in our everyday lives. My promise for this episode is clear. If you follow this journey with me, you will not only gain stories and insights to soothe your heart, but also practical ways to reclaim peace in the midst of chaos. Together, we'll learn to recognize the mental traps that consume our energy and find the tools to step out of them, gently but powerfully. The weight of modern education and the forgotten heart. Picture this: a student sits at their desk late into the night, surrounded by books, the screens, and the constant ping of notifications. Their mind is filled with deadlines, expectations, comparisons, and fears of failure. Their heart, however, is silent, and not because it is calm, but because it is drowned out. Isn't this the image of countless students, professionals, and even parents today? We live in an age where education is often reduced to results: numbers, grades, rankings, performance charts. These are the currencies of success. But what about the education of the heart? When was the last time someone taught us how to rest deeply, how to breathe through pain, how to hold compassion for ourselves? The Platform Sutra, a text that has guided seekers for over 1,000 years, reminds us that true wisdom is not about collecting more information. It is about returning to the root of awareness, about recognizing that the mind itself can either be our prison or our liberation. When the sixth patriarch Hu Enning heard just one line from the Diamond Sutra, "Let your mind arise without dwelling on anything," his heart was illuminated. He wasn't a scholar. He wasn't a monk at the time. He was simply a man carrying firewood. And yet, that single sentence shifted his entire being. What does this tell us? That education in its deepest form is not about accumulation, but about awakening. From mental noise to inner clarity. Let's be honest, how often do we find ourselves caught in mental noise? You receive a short message from your boss, and suddenly your mind invents 10 possible criticisms. You notice a colleague's silence, and immediately you interpret it as rejection. You glance in the mirror, and the small lines on your face become a verdict of failure. This is the endless labeling of the mind. The Sutra calls us to recognize this process and not to suppress it, not to hate it, but to see it clearly. When you see your thoughts as labels rather than truths, you create space. Imagine you are at a crowded train station. People rush past you, some smiling, some frowning, some shouting. You don't need to stop each person and argue with them. You simply watch them pass. Thoughts are the same. When you stop chasing every thought, you begin to feel a strange lightness, as if the station is still crowded, but you are no longer trapped in the chaos. This shift is not abstract, it changes your day. A teacher overwhelmed by grading papers can pause, breathe, and remind herself, "These are tasks, not verdicts on my worth." A young man terrified of failure can learn to tell himself, "This fear is a thought, not my destiny." Isn't it powerful to think that one breath of awareness can turn exhaustion into clarity? The trap of inner exhaustion. Let's talk about inner exhaustion. That invisible fatigue that drains us even when we've done nothing physically demanding. Have you felt it? That heaviness after a day of scrolling social media and comparing yourself to others, or replaying a past mistake over and over in your head. You go to bed more tired than when you woke up, and yet you can't point to anything you physically did. That is the weight of mental overdrive. Education, as it is often practiced today, pressuring students, glorifying overwork, demanding constant achieve, Manta feeds this exhaustion, but the platform Sutra points us in another direction. It tells us don't add more weight to your mind. Instead, learn to see through the illusions of permanence and control. When we cling to success as if it defines us forever, or to failure as if it dooms us eternally, we create suffering. But when we allow experiences to come and go like clouds passing across the sky, the exhaustion begins to dissolve. Think of a glass of muddy water. If you keep stirring it, it never clears. If you set it down and let it rest, the mud settles and the water becomes transparent. Isn't that exactly what happens in your mind when you stop overthinking? Stories of everyday awakening. Let me share a story. A young woman named Emily was a top student, praised by teachers and envied by peers. But inside it, she was collapsing. She chased perfection in every exam, every assignment, every conversation. One evening, after failing to meet her own expectations in a debate competition, as she locked herself in her room, trembling with shame, on her desk lay a small booklet with a line from the Sutra: "Do not dwell on appearances, let the mind be free." She read it aloud, again and again. First it felt meaningless, but slowly she noticed her breath deepening. She realized that her pain wasn't from the debate, it was from clinging to the idea that she had to be flawless. That night didn't erase her struggles, but it planted a seed. Years later, she said that single sentence had been a lifeline, pulling her back whenever exhaustion threatened to swallow her. Another example, a father working long hours to provide for his family. He loved his children, but found himself snapping at them, too tired to listen, too anxious to rest. One evening, his young son asked him, "Dad, why are you always angry?" The words pierced him. He sat alone and remembered something he had once read from the Sutra: "The mind itself is the Buddha." He realized he had been waiting for peace to come from outside, more money and more recognition, more success. But peace was already in him, waiting for him to notice it. From that night, he began a small practice: 3 deep breaths before entering his home, reminding himself, time here. Enough. Slowly, his anger softened, his children noticed, his exhaustion began to lift. Aren't these stories reminders that wisdom doesn't need a monastery, that it can live in bedrooms, kitchens, offices, and classrooms? Education beyond information. We must ask ourselves, what is education for? If it only makes us smarter, but not kinder, if it fills our minds but empties our hearts, then something has gone wrong. The Sutra insists on balance. Knowledge without wisdom is like a tree with many leaves but no roots. It may look lush for a season, but it will not survive the storm. True education teaches us how to be human, shows us how to sit with discomfort without being devoured by it, how to act with clarity rather than impulse, how to love without clinging. It is not about memorizing doctrines, but about transforming perception. When a child learns to calm their breath before an exam, that is education. When a teenager chooses kindness over cruelty online, that is education. When an adult forgives themselves for not being perfect, that is education. And the miracle is this: when you educate the heart, the mind follows. A calm heart sees more clearly, works more effectively, and learns more deeply. Isn't that the very thing we've been missing in our schools, our workplaces, and even our families? Living the Sutra in daily life. How can you practice this in your own life? The Sutra offers a deceptively simple guide. Do not cling. Don't cling to success. Don't cling to failure. Don't cling to praise or blame. This doesn't mean apathy. It means presence. Try this the next time anxiety grips you. Instead of saying, "I must stop this feeling," try saying, "Here is anxiety, just that." By naming it, you create distance. You stop being the anxiety and start observing it. Then take a breath and let the thought pass. Like clouds, like trains in a station, like leaves in the wine. Or this: when someone criticizes you, before you react, pause to ask yourself, am I reacting to their words or to the story I'm telling myself about their words? More often than not, it's the story that hurts us, not the words themselves. And when you find yourself overwhelmed by work or life, place your hand on your chest and whisper, let it settle, like muddy water in a glass, to watch as clarity slowly returns. The deep promise of inner education. What happens when we begin to live this way is slowly the exhaustion that has haunted us begins to dissolve. We realize we don't need to fight every battle, fix every flaw, or chase every validation. We discover that calm is not something we must earn. It is something we must allow. This is the promise of the Sutra, that your heart can be your teacher, your mind can be your ally, and your life can be your practice ground. Education is not complete until it teaches you how to be at home with yourself. Reflection before we end. So let me ask you, what kind of education do you want to pass on to the next generation? Do you want to give them facts and figures alone, or do you want to give them the tools to find peace in the storm? Do you want to raise them to compete endlessly, or to live wisely with clarity and compassion? The answer begins with you. The way you live, the way you handle your own thoughts, the way you rest your heart. These are the lessons the people around you will absorb. Isn't it extraordinary to realize that by calming your own mind, you are already teaching without speaking a word? I invite you now to share your reflections. What is one small practice you can bring into your day to educate your heart, not just your mind? Leave a comment below. I would love to hear your story. And don't forget to like and subscribe and support this channel so we can continue to bring you wisdom that makes life lighter, clearer, and more beautiful. Thank you for watching this video.
Before you leave, here's something special. In Buddhism, we believe that every encounter carries a deeper meaning. Would you like to discover your true soul connection, the one written into your destiny? Take the Soulmate Test today and unveil the hidden truths of your journey. Click the link below and begin your path now.
http://soulmate. You wisdom more, calm, white.